Good morning. I have a couple of earthworms here I wanted to share with you. I just found these little guys in my worm farm bucket. These are red worms, red wigglers, or Icenia fidetta, and they're happy little guys. They're doing good right now. And these are juveniles. These are very small. They are not babies, but they are not sexually mature either. But I just thought maybe we could watch these guys crawl around. I'm gonna just remind you that these squares are 5 millimeters by 5 millimeters. So I'm gonna get this little guy and I'm gonna just very gently pick him up and bring him back into the camera here on the microscope stage so that we can see him. I'm going to see if we can get one adjustment here on the focus, if we can focus this just one more sharpness. Alright, I feel like that's a little bit better. So these worms are happy and healthy, and worms eat microorganisms. They digest the bacteria, the protozoa, the fungus, the microarthropods, little tiny incatraids, anything that is in the soil, they will eat it. They don't actually eat the soil itself, except the definition of soil is the living things in the soil, so I guess they do eat the soil. But they're not eating so much the minerals. They will use a little bit of mineral, just like any animal. And they'll use some organic matter that's in the soil. And they'll probably derive some nutrition from some of those places. But their main nutrition source are the bodies of the animals that live in the soil. Bacteria, fungus, protozoa, nematodes, microarthropods, incatraids, anything that fits in their mouth, they will utilize and they will eat. So it's very interesting to watch these worms and to see how they move around. I'm going to just point out which side is the front and which side is the back of these worms. So this yellow side is the tail. So that's the end of the worm, the back side of the worm. The mouth is up here. So this is the mouth side of the worm. So his mouth is right here, and her mouth is over here. And how can I tell if it's a he or a she? Well, at this stage, these worms are not sexually mature. But I know that they're both he's and she's because worms have both parts. Worms are both male and female because they have both parts. But they can't mate themselves and make babies. They have to mate with another worm, and then they will share genetic material, and they will become fertile. And so when two worms mate, they will both create an egg capsule and have eggs in it, and then they'll have babies. So that's pretty awesome to think about. Whenever I touch these guys, they hold still for a while. I wonder if that's a self-defense mechanism. I wonder if they think I'm going to eat them. So there's a couple of juvenile red worms. And I am not an expert on the species of worms. So there is a possibility that these are not red worms. But I did order red worms. And so, and then I put them in my worm bin. And that's what has been growing, are red worms. I also put some European night crawlers in there. But these worms are pretty tiny, so I thought they were red worms. So if somebody watches this and you are an expert on worms, let me know in the comments that this is a different species, because I honestly don't know, and I don't know how to tell. And that is not the purpose for which I'm making these videos. The reason I'm helping you make these videos is so you can have the very best garden of your entire life. I want you to be able to feed your family. And by understanding some of the basics, like earthworms help the garden, help the soil, they help to build a functioning soil. That's all we need to know about the worms to have an excellent, excellent garden. So I've got a 5-gallon bucket here full of big worms. And so I'm going to see if I can pull out a sexually mature red worm. Now here's a really big red worm, but I don't see his clitellum exposed. The clitellum is an enlarged ring where they make the egg capsule, and so that's how you can tell if they're sexually mature, is by seeing that clitellum. And so I'm going to get them out of this bucket here. I'm going to try to find some mature guys. So here's one right here. And I don't know, he still may be a juvenile. But let's bring him over. Let's take a good look at him and see what we can see. I feel like he's this one, even though he's large, I feel like he's still a juvenile, because I don't see his clitellum being really big and pronounced. He should be in this area right here, just behind his head. There's a certain number of segments back. If we counted each segment on him, we would know exactly where the clitellum is. But he's a pretty large worm. I mean, he's actually a pretty small worm, but he's large. And I thought, so sometimes when red worms get that big, it's easy to see their clitellum at that point in their life cycle. So here's another big one. That one's quite a bit bigger. And he is cruising, man. He's going off the table here. I'm going to bring him back. I'm going to try to inspect him. So this guy, he's really long. This worm is about 3 inches long, and I still don't see an engorged or enlarged. Yeah, it's right there. Right there, it's starting to enlarge a little bit. Sometimes it's really easy to see them, but right here, see how this is enlarged right here a little bit? That's his clitellum. His or hers, depending on how you want to think about it. So yeah, so this worm is sexually mature. And sometimes it's a lot easier to see. Let me see if I can find another worm in here that's obvious. Anyway, I'm just making this video for fun because I like doing this so much. I could play with worms all day and be content to be alive. Alright, so here's a worm. Let me get him on there. And he has an enlarged clitellum. And it's right under the camera right now. Right here. See this enlarged part that's a smaller color? See, his body comes back and then it's bigger. You can see it right there, and it's enlarged right there. He has a little bit of organic matter on him. But that's the clitellum right there. So that's a sexually mature worm. And you can see the slime. If you look down next to him, down in here, you can see that slime, that worm slime, which is a good thing. That's how they get through the soil, is they slime things up. Yeah, there, you can see that really well right now, right here. That's the clitellum. So he is sexually mature, and he's a pretty happy worm. I'll bring this worm over a little bit. All right, there you go. There's some red worms, I think. Pretty sure. Because the European night crawlers just get a lot longer. They're a lot bigger. Alright, so I've got this worm on the end of my needle, this little baby guy. So I'm going to move him. I'm going to put him back in the worm bin. I wonder if this is gross to people. I wonder if people think this is yucky. I don't know, I think it's fascinating. Worms, man. I think if worms died, if there were no more worms on the earth, we might have a mass extinction. Because worms make soil function. We need worms. Worms are important. Look at how they're crawling through there. I just think it's interesting how they expand and contract their muscles. You can see that perfectly. He's crawling right under those other worms. He's expanding and contraction as he goes. And see, they can go forwards or backwards. So he was going one way and now he's going the other. There's his nose right there. It just came into view. Right here was his nose. That was awesome. I'm going to back him up. I want him to do that again. Oh yeah, it's right there. There's his nose right here. Look right here. His nose is right there. So he's expanding and he went right underneath those other worms, contracting, pushing through. He's charging through right at the top of the screen. Man, this is the greatest thing. Look how these guys are charging around. It's so fascinating and interesting. You can't see all this stuff with the naked eye. This is a pretty good shot, actually, of seeing all these different segments of the worm and how they're moving along. You can see all that slime on them. You can see how the organic matter is sticking to them. There's one's nose right there coming up. There's one's tail. Oh, one of them, their nose is right up in the top left screen. The nose just came in and then he's going back out. Anyway, worms, man, worms. Worms are great. I'm just going to disrupt this whole problem. It's not a problem, but I did disrupt it. This pile of worms. Let's see about getting this guy out. So that's one of my big adults. On this one, okay, this is one of my... Okay, so I have one of my small juveniles here. So I'm going to take him. and I'm putting him in my worm bin. So now he's gone. And then I have this little tiny baby one here. See if we can get a hold of him without hurting him. No, I didn't hurt him, but I didn't get a hold of him either. Okay, I'm going to come in right here, and I'm going to pick him up. Let me just see about that. Okay, here we go. We're going to extract him. Okay, I safely have him now. I've got him right there. So I'm going to take him and I'm going to put him in the worm bin. So now what I have left are these two adults right here. Both of these have, their clitellums are large. They're engorged. I think they're young worms. I don't know how to tell the age of a worm. I just feel like they're young and healthy and happy. And we want these guys to mate and create thousands and thousands of baby worms. And I have no idea how many worms a healthy adult worm can create in its lifetime. All this stuff, we could look it up. I'm sure there's all kinds of research done on earthworms. I just don't know. What I do know is I want the worms in my soil. That is the key to this. And we're casting light on the outside of these. This is not a microscope that creates light that goes through the worm, but I think we would be able to see the insides of the worm if we were shining light inside. So the earthworms create tunnels, and they coat the tunnel with this slime that they have. Now he's coming back now. He's going in reverse. That's pretty awesome. Anyway, worms, man, worms. I love worms. I really like them. Okay, there's his nose right there, so that's the very top of him. And he is out of the picture. It's interesting watching them here on this microscope because they will feel, he's feeling with his tail just as much as he's feeling with his mouth. So when he was in reverse, he was moving back and forth to see where he was going. I'm just gently going to touch his mouth and see what he does. I wonder if they respond, how much they respond to touch. Well, he certainly responded to that. He jerked it away. That's interesting. Yeah, he's definitely responding a lot to touch. You can see the hairs. No, they don't have hair, but it's some kind of an appendage. I'm calling it a hair on the edge of his body. Right here is one. There's one. There's one. So I don't know what those are. We would need a more powerful microscope to see that and to study exactly what those hair-like structures are. I'm just gonna adjust this over a little bit. But see, we can see those, what I'm calling a hair, all along this critter. It's pretty fantastic to be able to see those. And I guess they're like little fingers or something that they can grab on with and move themselves through the soil. But as we come in here, you can see them all. You can see them here. It's like there's a little hair appendage. You can't see them all the time, but at certain points you can see them. All right, if you look right here, you can see this clitellum that's engorged. He's bunched up now. He's contracted here together, and that clitellum is big. and round. It's the easy way to see that. It's pretty awesome. Now, they say that sometimes worms will escape from your worm bin, and so if you have a worm bin in your house, you'll have worms crawling all over your house. I've never had that happen, and I've had worms bins for years, but I very seldom do I feed my worms kitchen scraps. A lot of people do, but I don't. I try to compost my kitchen scraps a little bit before I let them in the worm bin. And this guy has something on his nose right here, and I don't know what that is. I wonder if it's just a whole bunch of slime that has got hooked together. I don't like it. Here I am trying to be hygienic with a worm. Imagine that. Just observing the worms. So that worm is upside down right now, and you can see the little hairy guys right along there. It was like two little sets of almost like feet. I don't think we would call them feet. Somebody in the verma world, verma means worm, the vermology, I don't know if that's a term, but somebody who studies worms, they would know all of the different names of each little piece and part of the anatomy of this worm. I'm just glad to have worms. And this video has gone on over 20 minutes. This is incredible that I'm so excited to look at a worm under a microscope. But I'm thrilled with it. It's fascinating and interesting. Let's look at so a worm, these worms actually have a top and a bottom. I haven't thought about worms very much in my life, other than I knew I wanted a high population of them in my garden. But when you look at these guys, if you flip them over and they're the wrong way, like upside down, let's just try that real quick. If we flip them upside down, they're going to turn themselves right side up. Okay, they're both kind of upside down a little bit, and you can see the very bottom of this worm right here. This is like the belly or the bottom of the worm, right there. And they keep turning themselves over. They want to be oriented right side up. I didn't know that that was a thing with a worm. I've never thought of it. But it's actually true. See, as they're going along here, they're turning themselves and they're orienting themselves with gravity so that they're right side up. So that's pretty awesome. So that's an observation that I just barely made. I didn't even know that. I didn't think about that before. I don't know that that's going to help me be a better person, but it's pretty incredible. So he just ran into himself right over here. This was him running into himself right here. So this worm and this worm right here and right here are the same one. And he is cruising. I'm going to move my camera a little bit and I'm going to show you. He has gone off of the microscope. He's on my... I need to unhook this. It's going to be blurry for a second. But there he is. And he's coming back on the microscope slide. He's moving fast. But he was over here on the edge of my computer. This is my computer over here. I can focus that so you can see. And then these worms are just like taking over the entire workbench. And if you look down here underneath the workbench, I have this is one of my compost piles that's under here. This is compost number 2, and I have it in one of my blue tubs. So I have a 20-gallon tub down here that's full of compost. I have another one over there. And here's a white bucket. It's just a 5-gallon bucket here that I have some other worm casting and worms in down there, and that's where I was getting them out of to put them up here.